Morning, everyone. So I'm going to discuss, obviously, the far right terror attacks, as what they are, this morning. But also, I want to come in from a couple of main angles. First of all, because there are people out there. I've had people contact me who are part of particularly targeted groups, whether Muslims or just people from who aren't white, because these rioters don't know if you're a Muslim or not, do they? Um, and they're concerned, and part of the concern is not really knowing where the public are with this. Because are the public really against these rioters? Absolutely, they are. And there was some polling out yesterday that should make it really, really clear. Because believe it or not, it's not just that the majority of the public are against these rioters. Even and I mean the vast majority of Reform UK voters are against them. At which point, who have they got left? But I want to go over a couple of other things in terms of why the people taking part in these riots are, when Keir Starmer says they're going to regret it, he means it. We know that there are some, the proper thugs right at the core of this, they don't regret anything. They're just loonies. But the vast majority of them are absolutely going to. And the reason they know that is because of what happened in 2011. And the people taking part in these riots obviously do not know what happened in 2011. I'm actually just going to tackle, first of all, Vendetta put a thing in there about saying Starmer, it's not just Starmer as well, like basically everyone involved in government, about the two-tier policing. It says, oh, there is no two-tier policing, what planet he's on. So we do know that the police don't treat everyone equally. And what you're thinking in terms of is there's a lot of racism and misogyny baked into the police forces. The reason why Starmer is denying, all ministers are denying two-tier policing at the moment, is because right now the term two-tier policing is being used to mean treating people, what we would call on the far right, they deny they're far right, but treating these people, shall we say, the anti-immigration hate mob, more harshly than other people. So that is why, at the moment, absolutely everyone is having to deny two-tier policing, because the term right now doesn't mean not treating everyone fairly. It means specifically treating anti-immigration protesters, as they call themselves, more harshly than others. So there's been accusations that, for example, the Black Lives Matter protests a few years ago were treated more leniently than these ones. And as Priti Patel, who was the Home Secretary at the time, has been saying in the last day or two, no, because the Black Lives Matter protesters basically blocked roads. These people are kicking the crap out of buildings, torching buildings, attacking people, attacking property, looting, stuff like that. So, wonder of wonders, we've actually had Priti Patel. Priti Patel, can you believe it? Defending Black Lives Matter protesters and attacking far right thugs. That's where we are now. But that is why, when you will say, you and I will not say there's no such thing as two-tier policing, because we know what that means. For example, none of the many people who've been taken down by the police of the rioters, I haven't. Have you seen it? Has anyone seen any footage of the police kicking any of them in the head? I've not seen any footage of the police kicking anyone in the head. Have you? No, we haven't. So we know that there is two-tier policing, but right now, in this moment, no member of the government is going to say that. The police will never say it, obviously, even when they should. The government right now is not going to say it because it is being used as a term to mean attacking that. But anyway, never mind that. Let us get on to, first of all, because there are people concerned, they want to know where they are. The picture I've got a more hopeful picture behind me. This is a picture of a community coming out to clear up after the thugs have been in. And this is happening all over the place. It's even happening in some of the places where you would think the community may not be as opposed to the riots as in others. But people are still coming out and clearing up. Members of the community are still coming out and clearing up. There are always far more people who want their community together than want to divide it. But I'm going to refer, and I can't put it up, I'm afraid, because the resolution's always too poor. But I've put a link in the description below for people who want to check it out. I'm going to refer to a poll, right? So what's going to happen is is what happened in 2011. What happened in 2011 after the riots there? Because there was the riot kicked off in the normal way that most riots do. The police shot a black man, and the community kicked off. It was all very messy. But then there was a certain level of coordination to it. And organised riots took place in other parts of the country, and there was looting and all sorts. And there was a proper crackdown. And, footage was examined, and the police went over it, identifying as many people as they could who just took part in it. Doesn't matter whether you smashed a window in or threw bricks or anything. If you were there and they could identify you, you basically went to prison. And as I say, we had the example I use, which seems harsh. Again, it's to do with harsher sentencing. You had someone who didn't cause any damage as such, but nicked a bit of ice cream from like already broken window, went to prison. And the reason and it was still happening a year later. It wasn't just like get as many as we can to calm it down. Even a year later, the riots are long gone. There's no immediate danger of another one starting. But they wanted to make sure that absolutely everyone involved got the message: you're going to prison. And that doesn't worry the proper nutters, the real Tommy Robinson core, shall we say. That doesn't worry them. But there's not enough of them. There's hardly, if that's all that was turning up to these riots, do you know what? The police would handle it. There wouldn't be a riot. There's not enough of them. The problem is everyone else coming along, the people who have got ordinary lives, the people who don't want those lives pissed down the toilet. They've got a job. The job may not be great, but it's a job. They're all right with it. They've got a nice family life. They've got a home. Again, they may not have the greatest life. They may have some genuine grievances that their life's not brilliant. Although they should, as we keep saying, they should be blaming the billionaires, not the immigrants for that. But, they've got a family life. Their life's all right. It's not too bad. And they certainly don't want to go to prison. That's why some of the ones who have been convicted now have been crying in court. We've had men who thought they were hard. Like that fellow who got bricked in the Ghoulies thought he was hard. Some of these so-called hard men have been crying in court when they've been convicted, or when they've been pleading guilty, because most of them have been pleading guilty. And the reason for that is they didn't think anything would happen to them. They just thought it was a bit of disorderly conduct for which you get maybe a night in the cells, you get a telling off, you might get a fine, 80 quid fine or something. That's what they thought might happen to them at worst. Now they're finding out they're going to go to prison for years. The ones who've already been convicted, they're on remand now. Sentencing won't be for a while. It's not going to be for a long time, unfortunately, because one thing that did happen in 2011 that can't happen now is in 2011, the Conservatives had only been in power for a year. So we still had a well-resourced Crown Prosecution Service, police force, court system, all the rest of it. All of that after 14 years of savage cuts means it's now going to take longer, but they will keep going at it. And this is what senior lawyers have been saying. There is no statute of limitations. If someone has taken part in one of these riots, and let's say in a year's time, they think, oh, no one's caught on to me, I'm safe. No, they ain't. This could go on for years. It can go on for 10 years. If it takes 10 years for the police to identify them, then they'll go after them in 10 years' time. It's really there is no statute of limitations. They are never safe. If they can be identified, they are at no point are they safe. And you think to yourself, why would it be worth going after them after so long? Because for the next time, because what's happened here is people aren't aware what happened in 2011. So the government need to get that message through now that the problem is there's people lobbing bricks, there's people kicking windows, and there's people looting. Most people realize, okay, you're going to go to prison for that. But there's lots of people in the crowd, in the mob, that aren't doing any of those things. They're just there as part bulking out the mob. They probably think, well, they're not doing any harm, but they are, because they're part of the mob. The police cannot deal with them because they don't know that the police will sort of know the majority when it comes to it won't be violent, but they don't know which ones. So they have to treat the entire mob as if it could turn to violence, because it could. So even if you are as part of the mob, but you aren't intending on committing any act of violence yourself, you're still part of the mob, and that is still up to 10 years in prison for you. So these people don't realize that. So that's the message they're trying to get out. But in terms of this polling, people are asking about Musk. I'll get onto that in a moment. People in this polling, 49% of people agree with the harsher sentences. They agree the sentences should be harsher for whatever reason. Do you know what I think in most people's case? It's just because that is, in this country, we are a sort of lock them up, throw away the key type people, which isn't the best attitude. But in this particular case, just means the rioters have got no public support. 39% think the sentences should be normal. So they still think these people should go to prison, just with the normal sentences. There's only 4% of people think the sentences should be lenient. Now, if you think about the type of person who thinks the sentences should be more lenient than normal, these are obviously people who think, okay, maybe they've gone a bit far, but they've got a genuine grievance. And that's just 4%. That's nothing. But where it gets interesting is when you look at how they voted in the election. Because over half of everyone who voted for Labour or the Lib Dems or the Conservatives think that their sentence should be harsher. So they're actually thinking the sentence should be a bit harsher than the average member of the population. And only 3 or 4% of them think they should be more lenient. But Reform UK voters, 15% think they should be more lenient. So straight away, people were going, oh yeah, of course, Reform UK voters think they should be more lenient, but they don't. 15% it's like 4 times the rate of the national average, but it is still a very low rate. Only 15% of Reform UK voters, who are the stop the boats crowd at the end of the day, only 15% of them think there should be any leniency shown to these rioters. The rest of 78%, well, actually, the 7% don't know. 78% of Reform UK voters think these people should not get any leniency. 51% think they should have the normal sentences. 27% think they should have harsher sentences. Now, you look at 27% and you think, well, that's half the rate. That's roughly half the rate of the national average. So there's way fewer Reform UK voters think they should be dealt more harshly. And you go, yeah, sure. But that's still nearly double the rate of Reform voters think they should be dealt harshly than think they should be dealt leniently. And 78% of Reform UK voters think they should be dealt properly, no leniency. So even Reform UK voters, by the vast majority of them, are not supporting these riots. So all this, we're representing ordinary people, we're representing like the silent majority, it's all rubbish, absolute rubbish. In terms of the Elon Musk thing, because a few people have been asking about that, what do I think about that? Elon Musk has been trying to give Keir Starmer shit, because Starmer has obviously criticised his Elon Musk has been saying, oh, this is civil war's inevitable. I mean, first of all, only an American could think that. What he may not understand is we don't let citizens have guns in this country. So a civil war is actually really hard. But there isn't even the desire for civil war, much less the resources, because it's a tiny number of people who've amplified themselves. That's all that's happened here. There are reasons I could say this has happened now as well. It's happened. It's no surprise that it's happened just as Labour have come in. And part of the reason I suspect, I mean, obviously this will be the source of investigation and study over the next few years, but it wouldn't surprise me if part of the reason for this is the fact that the far right know that this is the UK at its weakest. So they know that the Conservatives have stripped away the criminal justice system, policing and the criminal justice system is at its absolute weakest. Dealing with these people, we're at our absolute weakest after 14 years of the Tories not only enabling their behaviour, but stripping away all of our defences against this sort of attack. And they know that Labour, even without these attacks, would turn the tail back. So if they'd have tried this on in a few years' time, policing and the criminal justice system would be in a much better place. Like, one of the problems we've got at the moment is people are saying, well, where are we going to put them? It's all right saying there's going to be thousands of people going to prison. We haven't got the room for them. And it's like, no, that's why sentencing has been delayed. They've been reopening old buildings to put them, like the people who are on remand, you'd think, where's the room for them even in? They've been opening up closed down detention centres, basically. So, when people talked about Nightingale, why don't we do Nightingale prisons? We sort of have, in a way, in that they've been opening up detention centres to put them on remand. But the sentencing is not going to be for like next month and beyond, because what we're doing now we were always going to do it anyway. The government had already announced that before these riots started. We're going to have to release people from prison. But people are asking, where's the room in prisons? Remember, we've got a prisons minister who thinks a third of the people in prison shouldn't be there anyway. So if we have to release more people from prison early in order to make room for these rioters, that's what we're going to do. And that is what's going to happen. So there will be room. At the moment, the query is, where's the room to put them on remand? So that's why they're reopening open centres. And have we got the staff? That's a key question. Have we got the staff? But as soon as we start getting people out, then, that is what that is. Daniel saying, I heard Douglas Murray said continued disorder will topple the government. What's the odds of that happening? 0. It's not going to happen. The public are fully in support of this action. What's happening at the moment? There are unfortunately still going to be attacks. I don't know for how long. Part of the reason is that message needs to get across that you are going to prison for a long time if you turn up. Most of the people turning up to these riots are, as I say, they're not the Nazis. They're a relatively small bunch. They're racist, sure. Xenophobic, sure. They've been badly misguided on immigration, absolutely. But they're basically people with ordinary lives. And these are not people who want to go to prison. Their lives are over if they go to prison. So it's a case of telling those people, what needs to happen is we just need more and more people who are going to these things to realize that they are going to prison. They are being filmed. They're filming each other, for goodness sake. They're filming themselves and putting it online. So they're going to be identified and they are going to go to prison. And, you think to yourself, in most of our own life, even if some of you, may not have the best life, but you think to yourself, do you want to go to prison? No, because that would wreck your relationships. You wouldn't be able to see your kids very often. Your kids would have to see you in prison. How awful is that? For a lot of people, that works. That will work. And all you need to do, you just need to stop those people going to the riots. Because if all you've got left are the people who don't care if they go to prison, they're so far down the rabbit hole that they don't care if they go to prison. Their lives are that far gone. There's not enough of them to bother the police. The police will easily deal with those people. If all you had was those nutters. That's why most of these demonstrations take place in London, because you can get a lot of people to congregate on one place in London for a massive demonstration. You can't do that in multiple cities all on the same day or at the same time. To do that, you need to bulk it out with lots of other people who will not be there if they're going to go to prison. There's a super chat there. I've got to find it now. Something's gone really weird with my screen for some reason. Johnny Cophead, £2. Thank you very much. Turd Hall has much to answer for. Yeah, Farage. Yeah. So at some point as well, we're now starting to get explicit comments that those agitating online will be in for it. I'm not going to hold my breath with Nigel Farage himself because he's sly. For example, if we go to that two-tier policing thing, you'll notice that Nigel Farage doesn't himself say there's two-tier policing. He talks about there's this widespread perception of it. So he says, that's his dog whistling. He says, oh, people feel this, people feel that. He doesn't say it himself. Whether that's enough to get him off, I don't know. I think he's sly. People like Tommy Robinson may well have gone too far now. That, he may find himself in and he certainly should find himself behind bars for a long time, for various things, and others as well. I'm not sure. I mean, if there were to be real justice, Farage himself should absolutely find himself behind bars for 10 years. Because when you look at, you look at some of these things. Let me have a look here. I'm just going to have a look. The Home Office were putting out a few of the sentences you can get. And it's so you can get up to 10 years for rioting. That means just there. You're just part of the mob. You're just in the crowd. If you're there, if you're identified as being part of the riot, you don't have to have kicked a window in. You don't have to have lobbed a brick. Just being there, you could get up to 10 years. Violent disorder up to 5 years. All of this can be added on, of course. Inciting racial hatred up to 7 years. So you could racist chanting. You can get 7 years for that. Criminal damage, that's the kicking the window in, up to 10 years as well. So the Home Office are putting out these sentences, what you can potentially get. And we also know that they're trying to get, they're trying to get the message out that we are guiding the courts to give the harsher end of the sentences. Obviously, we're not going to actually have people getting 10 years for the right just being in part of the mob, because a lot of these people will plead guilty specifically to get lower sentences. But it doesn't matter, because even a few years in prison for these people destroys their lives. So you get that message out to everyone else. That's what's happening here. Lee's saying that I definitely think this has happened to make things difficult for the new Labour government straight away. Apart from Russia and the right-wing media, it would surely benefit the elites to cause chaos. It is absolutely. This has been planned well in advance, right? The Southport killings may have been the spark, but all of this, you can't organise something like this quickly. You can't just this isn't a random. They're trying to make out, oh, it's just it's just people have just happened to come out and done this. No, they haven't. This has been organised, very carefully organised. We've seen the lists, the lists that have gone out, with targets and dates and sometimes times. We knew when they were going to be targeted. They're out on like community Facebook posts. They've been on my local community Facebook post, times and places, very specific places. And so we know, that this is it has been organised. It's very carefully organised. And you've got, and it was clearly being organised for when Labour came to power. And I also think they wanted to do it quite soon after Labour came to power, because like I said, they will never have a better chance. The government is, obviously, it's only just formed. These are brand new ministers. They've not been used to being in government, most of them at all, and some of them not for a long time. And the criminal justice system and the policing has never been weaker. And it won't be this weak in a few years' time. It will be stronger in a few years' time. So they certainly couldn't wait a few years. This was their best time to strike, but it's still not going to work. It was unfortunately going to cause a lot of damage. Josh, £5 super chat, thank you, says, are there any plans to prevent a new generation of the far right emerging, be it through education and critical thinking? So there will have to be, certainly. There will have to be. I'll tell you something else as well. It will happen under Labour. The problem is what we need is the Conservatives to realise that this doesn't help. What I would like is for the Conservatives to realise this hasn't helped them, because they are responsible in two ways for what's happened here. First of all, they're responsible because they have cut back the criminal justice system and policing, and they know that. They should take responsibility for that. I could understand them not publicly taking responsibility, but privately they should understand that a lot of this has been caused because they have under-resourced policing and the justice system. But the second way that they're responsible is they've also allowed the rhetoric to come through. Suella Braverman, whilst Home Secretary last year, said there's too much emphasis on far-right ideology, not enough Islamist extremism, right? So that's what she said as Home Secretary. The Conservatives have to own that because she was their Home Secretary. Even if they're now sort of disowning Braverman a little bit, they need to recognise that they allowed those comments to be made by a senior member of their government. They have to own that. And they have to make it clear that that is not their view now. Because the way you look at it is, when people talk about, so yes, there are Islamic extremists, and yes, some of them try to murder people, some of them sometimes succeed in murder people. It's almost always like a lone wolf or a small group of people. What we're looking at here is a large organization of far-right groups who have torched buildings, who have attacked buildings, who have attacked people, who've tried to murder people. They just haven't succeeded. That's all. So, and I was told as a teacher, when the Conservatives brought Prevent in, which is a counter-extremism program, and the police came to give us our training as teachers, because we were co-opted, we were supposed to try and spot the signs, and they made it clear to us, where I am in the North Midlands, which is very, it is very sort of anti-immigration country. It's a breeding ground for these sort of people. And yet the police told us very clearly that the specific threat was far right extremism, not Islamic extremism. He said there's no issues with Islamic extremism in my specific area. There are sometimes in little pockets, but in actual, and the vast majority, it's far right extremism that is the actual threat to the nation. Johnny Copperhead, £5, thank you. It says, can we sentence Piers Morgan to 10 years, not for writing, just for being Piers Morgan? Unfortunately, there's no law against being Piers Morgan. There is, unfortunately, also further not a law against being a knobhead, because there aren't enough prison spaces. But, you know, there we go. Stephanie Wilson saying there, of course, this is why he wants to recall Parliament, says Farage. By the time Parliament comes back in autumn, this will be over, dealt with. He'll look like a fool if he tries then. Oh, no, he won't. He will still try it then. The reason why I want MPs to be careful about calling for a recall to Parliament is right now it's still a tinderbox. Nigel Farage will never stop talking about this while he's allowed in Parliament. He'll keep bringing it back, but while the riots are still going on, terror attacks really, while they're still going on, because again, it's like, how are the government trying to stop the rioting happening? They're trying to warn people, you're going to prison. You're going to prison. If you're even there and we see you and we catch you, you're going to prison. What Nigel Farage is trying to say to these people is, you've got a genuine grievance. You've got a genuine grievance. There's no moral right for this action to be taken against you. You've got a genuine grievance. You shouldn't be rioting. Oh, it's a little bit naughty, but we understand actually you've got a genuine grievance. That's what the message he wants to push. And he can push it on GB News. GB News really should be accused of terrorism themselves. They are pushing the message that this is all caused by Labour not dealing with immigration. That's what they're saying. Right, let's go through some more super chats missed. Lewis Allsop, £5, thank you very much. It's looking through comments on most social media, so much vitriol by racists and bots, and it's getting worse. What can be done to alleviate this? So about the racists is you arrest them and put them in prison. There's a lot of people agitating online, on Twitter. I mean, I see it on Twitter all the time, and they're using their own accounts. So at some point when the police start to go, I think at the moment, because we're so poorly resourced, that there's, you know, they're trying to deal with the people actually rioting at the moment, but they will get around to the people posting stuff online as well. And a lot of those people are using their own accounts. So the police will get hold of those people. There are anonymous accounts being used. That is trickier. In terms of bots, that is a more long-term problem. There is legislation. The Tories actually passed legislation which should help. Unfortunately, it doesn't come online until next year and the year after. So there's an online safety bill. Was it, or the Online Safety Act, is it called? Which, and a lot of people are saying, you know, it was a bit crap as a piece of legislation according to a lot of experts, but it does have some meat in it as well, which would be helpful now, but it's only just been passed and it doesn't come into force. It comes into force over the next couple of years. So there will be a bigger stick to beat social media platforms with, but not now. But there probably needs to be another look at it as well, certainly. But in terms of if people are posting as themselves this racist behavior online, then action can be there's already laws in place to deal with that. There's another super chat up there. Josh, £5, thank you. It says, are there any plans to prevent a new generation of far right emerging? Oh no, I've already done that one. Sorry, I did do that. So yeah, in terms of stated plans, there will have to be plans. But at the moment, you know, and I think there always would have been anyway, under a Labour government, you always get an emphasis on counter-extremism and on critical thinking. We had it under the last Labour government without a specific threat like this. But the threat's always there. It's always underneath. The far right has always been there. And this is the thing, when they say, oh, we just want our country back, this country has never existed. Far right attacks like this, they go through history. You can go back to the 18th century and find far right riots, all complaining about the same things. Like, in living memory, this country that they want back has never existed. They just think it has, because there have been, when they moan about multiculturalism, there have been parts of the country which have, you know, a few decades ago were just basically white. There were no people with like dark hues of skin there at all. So that's what they say when they want their country back. They don't mean their country. They mean they grew up in this small little pocket that hadn't yet been touched by multiculturalism. The country has always been multicultural. But there have been small communities where, or even larger communities, where, you know, it was basically just white. Everyone was just white. You grew up with people white. You might have every now and then seen someone of Asian or African origin. Hardly ever. It was very rare. That's what they want back. They're basically racists. They're racist because the country, you know, had there hasn't been an explosion in like immigration in the country, which they say. It's just their part of the country. But there we go. But I mean, ultimately, that is what's happening here. And also you see some of the violence that's going on because we know that mosques have been targeted, and we know that asylum, like hotels housing asylum centers, have been targeted. But we also know there's just random people going around just breaking houses. There was Channel 4 News did a program which I watched, and part of it just shows this. I can't remember where it was now, and it just showed this group of youths going down the street kicking windows in and kicking car windows in. They weren't protesting against anything. In one of the houses, they kicked the window in, the glass flew in, and it hit a kid, a small preteen kid, same age as the kids that were murdered in Southport last week. So this group of marauding thugs went down the street, and I mean, what if she was seriously hurt? She's traumatized. You know, her you know, she's sat in her front room. Glass has been kicked in. A shard of it's hit her in the hand and caused, you know, an injury. That kid's now traumatized. That kid may now have PTSD, and it's absolutely horrendous. But the vast majority of people also see it as horrendous. In fact, Alec Barrett there, £5 super chat, thank you. He says, far right riots happened in the 13th century, very similar rhetoric today, they actually won then. But I mean, these things they go way back. I mean, I'll just leave this as my last point. When I was growing up, there was a lot of very overt racism in the UK. I was born in the mid-70s, so I wasn't aware of the very violent race riots of the 70s. But it was everywhere in the 80s. You know, just the casual, even though I would say growing up, I didn't see, you know, because like, if you want to talk about different tiers of racism, if we're talking about people actively beating people up because of the color of their skin, or just saying you are inferior to me because of the color of your skin, I didn't witness personally any of that firsthand, but there was plenty of racist language about, and it was on the telly as well. And I don't just mean like in Sickness and in Health, where racist language is used, but it was an anti-racist program. It was an anti-racism program because the racist main character always suffered for his racism. But there was actual, I mean, Bernard Manning, a famously racist comedian, in the 80s, he was on the television, he was mainstream. Whereas by the 90s, he was still doing his thing, but it was in his own club. He wasn't on the telly. And you had this movement in the 90s of tackling not just, you know, the violent expressions of racism, but even the language being used. And it became known as political correction. And people would whine about it. Comedians would whine about it. Even Billy Connolly said, oh, political correction is the language of cowardice. And it's like, no, mate, it's because the language is used to make racists think that, because you might think the language isn't harmful, but actually it's been used to normalize racism and allow the racist to think that they can act with impunity. And what happened was the racism never went away, but it became much less noticeable because the racists started to realize that it was socially unacceptable. There was, you know, to even use racist language. And what, unfortunately, then, so we sort of started to turn it back. And the racism was always there, and there'll be people that were victims of racism even during those times. I'm not saying it went away, but it was massively in retreat, and then it came back. You know, you would say Brexit was probably the trigger for it. I would say maybe a little bit earlier with the rise of UKIP. But Brexit unleashed the floodgates. All of a sudden, all these racists thought they were back in amongst the majority again, and it's just got worse from there. Final super chat, because we have run out of time. David Welsh, €5 super chat. Thank you very much. We've got continental, or maybe continental. It might be Irish. Even when it was all whites, they hated Irish immigrants like my family. Oh, there you go. Should have read it first. No blacks, no dogs, no Jews, no Irish, etc. Human conditions, some are haters. Yes, absolutely. And until you make that socially unacceptable, like the racist will always exist. Like if you look at a tolerant country, or a country you would say is a tolerant country, the racists are still there. There's still the same racists there. They're aware that it's not socially acceptable. So they keep it where they think they can get away with it, which I wish I could say was just behind closed doors, but they will still racially abuse some people where they think they can get away with it, unfortunately. But you do get a reduction. We've had a massive increase in racially motivated crime since 2016. We know that. It's in the stats. We know that. Let's have a look. One more super chat and then I think we're done. Apparently. No, I've done that one. Graham's telling me I missed a super chat. I did not. I referenced the 13th riots. But we'll leave it there. I mean, we could go on forever on this one, couldn't we? But we'll leave it there. I've got to get off somewhere anyway. But thanks very much for coming on, everyone. We will beat this. I'm very much feeling for those who are being targeted. But just know that your communities, it would be nicer if the communities came out like they did in Liverpool to protect that mosque like all the time. But we also understand why people either can't do that or unless you know you're going to be part of a group of like 300 people, wouldn't feel safe. But the communities are not on the side of these rioters at all. Not even Reform UK supporters are on the side of these rioters. They've got no one. They're just an amplified mass. And the media should make more of that. They should make more of that. But there we go. Thanks very much for coming on. Have a great day. And don't forget to click the like button and subscribe, of course. And until next time, I'll see you later.